So my guest today is Peter Sims, who is the author of the best-selling books, Little Bets, How Breakthrough Ideas Emerge from Small Discoveries, as well as True North, Discover Your Authentic Leadership, which he co-wrote with Bill George, former CEO of Medtronic. He is currently the founder of Black Sheep, a new social entrepreneurship venture, and in prior career roles, he worked as an investor and a management consultant. Today, Peter is a member of GE's Innovation Advisory Panel and is also a co-founder and director of FuseCore, which is a social venture partnership with McKinsey & Company that places promising young leaders in one-year-long projects with mayors and governors across America to tackle critical public policy challenges facing our nation. Peter's writing has appeared in the New York Times, Bloomberg, the Financial Times, Harvard Business Review, TechCrunch, Mashable, and Fast Company. And he's also lectured and advised clients including Google, Pixar, The Gap, Genentech, Cisco, Clorox, Amazon, and Stanford University. Peter, it's a real treat to have you. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you reaching out.
I'd love to start out first by just getting a sense of your background for our readers and listeners. Tell me a little bit about how old are you, what's your academic background, and where have you worked in the past?
Well, I'm 36. My academic background is I've been, a student of the humanities, a student of business, an MBA. And I basically am a lifelong learner where I try to learn a little bit from everyone I speak with. So that's sort of who I am. Cool. And get this, Andrew, you just introduced me. You're very kind to introduce me the way you did. You asked me before. I don't know if you were recording the whole thing, but when you started the recording, you said, is it Black Sheep or Black Shop? And I've just updated my website. I know nothing about websites, but I've just updated my website as best I can using this updating tool to reflect that it's the Black Sheep, not to be confused with Black Shop. So I'm just updating my website right now. You can go to the website and see it, Andrew, real time. That is your contribution. So I learned a little something right there from you. How about that? You there? I can't hear you, man.
Sorry, I was saying that's super agile.
Exactly.
Yeah. What are you using WordPress? What are you using to?
I'm using WordPress. That's right.
Cool.
I really know very little about this, so.
You figure it out. You get there. I want to know a little bit about your own career journey. So I read actually both your books, and in the book you co-authored with Bill George, True North, you talk about how personal stories and struggles form the basis of one's leadership style, and importantly, a lot of leaders experience what you describe as a crucible or a challenging period in life, either at home or work, that deeply tests you and transforms your understanding of leadership, which is then followed by a period of rapid acceleration in leadership development. Yeah. And I imagine the same is true in career choices that you make at key turning points in your life. And I know your interest in leadership and innovation was in many ways inspired by your experience at Stanford. Tell me a little bit about how your career path unfolded and took you to your current role as a social entrepreneurship founder, book author, public lecturer in design thinking innovation. What were the major turning points, and what was your crucible along the way, and what were the major thought processes you went through at key decision points?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, first of all, thank you for doing so much homework and research. And let me just get a sense for your audience. How old is your audience here that you expect this to go to?
Young professionals, generally in the first half of their career, so call it 22 to late 30s or so.
Well, we've got this just generation of entrepreneurs, and they're both social entrepreneurs and for-profit entrepreneurs, and really I'm referring to it as Gen Entrepreneur, but I sort of feel like that's not the right term even. But my career path has two parts. One is that when I was younger, in my high school years, I guess I wasn't a very good student when I was in the early grades. I got kicked out of my second grade class for wanting to go out and play too much. So I ended up getting really interested in achievement when I was in I guess like junior high school, sixth grade. My parents really emphasized the importance of achievement. So from then on, really focused on external achievement because that's what, that was, I guess, what I was supposed to do. And, I also enjoyed the process of of having a goal and achieving it. So whether it was on the athletic fields where I was, captain of teams, or my ski team won the state championship, and then, as I got into I got to Bowdoin College. I was lucky to get admitted to Bowdoin College because I didn't do very well on my SATs, but they let me in anyway. And when I got there, I was, first interested in trying to become a better writer because I just really didn't know how to write when I got to college. I'd gone to a pretty small rural high school in Northern California, and I worked really hard to catch up with the kids who were from prep schools and a little bit better prepared than I was. Fortunately, Bowdoin had an environment that was really conducive to studying, like I say, the humanities. So I took classes across sociology and economics, and government was my major, history was my minor. I really, really passionately studied history and Civil War history in particular, and a lot of American government, and took a strong interest in European history as well. So, I took a class across the board, and I was not prepared for the business world because I didn't know how to use Excel, and that was the first assignment I had when I got to Deloitte Consulting. So, for the first year and a half into my career, I just tried to learn the basic skills that you need to have to do a job. So I learned about Excel, I learned about PowerPoint, I learned about all the things that you do when you start a job. And that was really helpful because I hadn't learned any of those skills in school, but I had learned how to think about industries, and that was helpful in consulting. I was only, like I say, in consulting for about a year and a half. I ended up working on the strategy team. I was an analyst on the strategy team that supported the Deloitte Consulting global strategy, and that was a fascinating experience for me because I got a chance to get exposed to a whole bunch of people who were from different offices of the firm. And if you think of the progression of my career, I had some interest in business when I was in high school. I mean, one of my first jobs. Well, my first job was at a record store. I got fired from that job, it was a good experience. And then I got a chance to work at the savings and loan that my scoutmaster Bob Hayden ran, and I really enjoyed that job. So I guess I was interested in business from that age. And then when I went to Bowdoin College, I was very involved in extracurricular activities, and I was president of my class the junior year, and then I was on a bunch of trustee committees senior year, and I got to know some people there. And this is where I really think the experiences you get, whether they're in school or after, are so valuable, is because, I got to know somebody, and I got to know a number of people who are trustees at Bowdoin who I have kept in touch with, including a guy by the name of Bob White, who is one of the co-founders of an investment firm, a venture capital and private equity firm called Bain Capital. And Bain Capital obviously is very well known today because Mitt Romney was the founder of Bain Capital. In fact, he brought Bob White with him to start the firm with 3 other people, or maybe 2 other people. And so, I was able to learn with people like Bob White, who respected me from my point of view when I was a student, and I then aspired to get into venture capital because that's how I perceived things to get done. But all this is very extrinsic, external, and I'm really thinking about a few things. I mean, I'm really not thinking about anything besides that I'm identifying with my achievement. So my high school nickname that my tennis coach, Paul Phillips, gave me was Patches. And that was meant, I talked with him about when he started coaching the tennis team junior year, he would ask me, how to approach the team because I was captain of the team. He said, hey, let's just focus on getting patches. And so, that was kind of a funny nickname. And he and I are still good friends to this day. His nickname is Power Phillips, Patches. So we still call each other that. And we played tennis on a regular basis and really just more than anything laugh and talk a lot. So, I'm going to summarize in a very concrete way what I learned about achievement in the first part of my career, and that is, our parents teach us about, the importance of doing well in things, whether it's grade or athletic achievement or what have you. And that's a really strong cultural norm in the United States and around the world. And, I did that to no end, relentlessly until I was about 30 years old. And, when I was along the way, I was definitely following curiosity, and I was getting to know interesting people, and I was following those types of crumbs to sort of piece together what my career was going to be in skills, right? We're building skills, and you kind of feel like there's a linear progression. I did, at least, when I went from consulting to venture capital, and I was in venture capital with Summit Partners in Boston, and I worked for a great guy, Marty Mannion, who really taught me everything I know about investing. And then I was asked by another partner to go to London to start the London office with this partner, the European office of Summit Partners. So I was interacting with entrepreneurs all across the U.S. and Europe. And again, I didn't feel a sense of meaning. And so I basically, I had a great experience in Europe. I really felt lucky to be there. Again, kind of small town progression, farther and farther away from home. My girlfriend was French, and that was awesome. It was just a great cultural experience. But then, I basically hit the wall. And so that was the first wall I hit. I hit a number of walls. I was about 26 or 27 when I hit the first wall. And I just had a hard time getting out of bed in the morning, and I just had a hard time motivating for work. And I'd already applied to business school, so I was hopeful that I would get in. And fortunately, I got into Stanford. So that was very lucky. And, the people I work with at Summit were great. The person I went to London with, Scott Collins, and I keep in relatively close touch. And, we worked out of a suitcase for 2 years to try to start up an office there. And now it's got 15 people. So, they've got $1 billion fund, and it feels rewarding to look back on it that way. But I went to business school to figure out what to do. And so, I ended up, the first year at Stanford at the time I went was in my opinion, I think of it as soul crushing. And the reason I say that is because there's no room for creativity in the curriculum at the time. And so you take classes ranging from operations to microeconomics to statistics to all this stuff. And that's all very valuable. I'd taken a lot of those classes before at Bowdoin, and so I felt like it was a bit repetitive. And I also felt like it was a bit too theoretical for the type of work I was interested in, which was coming out of Summit. I really loved entrepreneurs, and working in Europe, I just had so much admiration for the I hate to use the term American entrepreneur, but just the American style of entrepreneurship. And I just remember feeling like, going to Stanford would be a chance to connect with that and to get back close to my family, which was more important. So anyway, long story short, all that's external. And what changed, what flipped, starting in business school, was that I started to get more in touch with my own values and what was important to me. And, part of that process was just reacting to things I didn't like the first year curriculum at Stanford. I nearly thought about dropping out. They've since changed it, their curriculum, but I thought about dropping out that first year because I really didn't. I was just, I was exhausted. And so then, at the end of the first year, then one of the great things about going to business school, especially places, where like Stanford, where they have a really strong network, is that they have guest speakers come in, like Bill George came to speak. So Bill George, the former CEO of Medtronic, came to speak, and he was a really smart guy, who was talking about values and leadership and authenticity and authentic leadership. And that really resonated with me. My parents are both very authentic people, and, I came from a pretty small town where people are just pretty authentic. And so when Bill came, I thought, wow, this is a very credible person to come and speak about this. So he and I had the chance to meet him briefly afterwards with a couple of my classmates, and then he and I kept in touch. We invited him to come be a lecturer at Stanford. And with the permission of the dean, we got permission from the dean to do that. And then he said he was fully committed to HBS because that was his alma mater, and he was working on developing courses there. So he and I, so we said, a friend of mine and I, Ryan Frederick, and I said, well, screw this. We're gonna start a class, because this is important. We want to talk about this here, and we don't have classes on leadership here at Stanford. That's since changed too, but at the time there wasn't really much offering, to think and talk about leadership, and that's kind of a loaded term, but really it was just like, how do you take your values and make a difference in the world, make an impact, and do it in the business world. So that was a class called Leadership Perspectives that we recruited a couple professors for, Charles O'Reilly and Joel Peterson. They're both really interesting, insightful people. Charles is an academic, and Joel is a practitioner. And so we had all kinds of fun developing this class with a group of our classmates over the summer between the 2 years. And I internship with a top entrepreneur, Chet Pipkin, that summer in Los Angeles, one of the Summit portfolio companies. And you know, I just got really into this project. And so, you know, Bill George and I got to know each other because we would talk once a week, and he invited Ryan and me out to Colorado with some of his students from HBS, and we just had a great time learning and conceptualizing how to piece these classes together. So we learned a lot from each other. He needed to get insight from the younger people, and he and I would talk a lot about conceptual development of ideas, and he's bounced ideas for a book to follow on authentic leadership. And I had been talking with him so much about this stuff that he said, you know, would you like to work on that project together? And I said, wow, you know, yes, that'd be amazing. You know, thank you so much. I mean, that sounds like an incredible opportunity, and, you know, once in a lifetime experience to meet people and interview people like we've been doing for this class at Stanford, Leadership Perspectives. So I figured I'd just do that once and go back and get a job. But what happened was it was the richest learning experience of my life, and I met a lot of people who were really inspiring, really inspired by Howard Schultz of Starbucks, and Richard Tait, who was the founder of Cranium. Had a really memorable day just back in 2005 where I think I realized that I really wanted to be an entrepreneur that day, because Howard and Richard are both what I consider examples of artistic entrepreneurs. And so that felt, to me, really like it fit. And just inside, there's some voice inside that said that, but it would be years before I kind of fully realized how to make it happen. So this is all, again, part of the transition. I'm sorry for a long-winded answer, but I think this might be just, you know, answering this maybe just the best thing for your blog, because
yeah, I think this is great. This is great.
Learned a lot because, you know, the other thing that happened was I realized in this transition phase between extrinsic and more intrinsic motivation that that I was, or you can think of it at many different levels. I mean, it's from the external to a more spiritual, from extrinsic to more intrinsic. I realized that it was really important not only to know your values, but to know my interests. And then that's where the kind of a problem set in, because, you know, we wrote the book in True North. We wrote the book True North and did all the research and did the book, and that Bill and I both felt really proud of the product. And you know, and then you got to go out and market the book, and you got to go out and do speaking, and that was new for me. So I was really uncomfortable going on a national stage. I was 30 years old, and I was really quite uncomfortable in my skin at that stage. And whenever I now see this with my colleagues at the Black Sheep who are on the national stage for the first time, and it's interesting to watch because they go through some of the same things I experienced, and so. Long story short, you know, I had to learn a lot about self-awareness before I was really ready to do something like that. And I thought, again, I would just go back and get a job, something entrepreneurial. And, you know, the crucible, there are a couple crucibles that happened in that time frame. You know, one was that, you know, Bill and I just could not agree on the right role for me for this launch of True North. And so painful as it was for me, to have to kind of sit back and kind of watch from the sidelines after our, you know, this work of you know, art kind of went out into the world. We were so proud of the work. It was the right thing because it was Bill's book, and I was lucky to be, I call it the player to be named later, you know, the junior author on the book. And so I needed to learn from that experience about, you know, just how to effectively do different stages of promoting an idea or a product. And, you know, at the same time, I had a very serious girlfriend at the time who was a wonderful person, and, you know, it just didn't work out. So we had to end got engaged. Before it didn't work out, it worked out. So we got engaged, and, you know, she's a wonderful, like, partner. All the boxes were checked. You know, if you went down the checklist, she had all the boxes checked. She's a, you know, beautiful woman. She's a professor. She's a social entrepreneur. She's, you know, all these things in Northern California, gal, and a really nice family. But it just didn't work out. And what happened was I really got into this whole field of design and design thinking at the Stanford Design School, again, by just following my interest. And this is a longer conversation, but you know, it was really in that period when, you know, I had this conflict with Bill, very significant, serious conflict. It was almost like and he and I are now, you know, cordial and friendly, but and I love what he's doing. I mean, I think he's a terrific thought leader and voice. But you know, and same with Kathleen, by the way. Kathleen and I are very, very close. We're just, I mean, say very close. I mean, we really respect one another. And so we just got together last weekend to catch up. She's got a kid and everything else. But, you know, there was that period from kind of 30 years old to, Harold just called, by the way. I just feel like he would be extra baggage to this poor guy. Maybe we can call him at the end. But I had to learn about what was important to me first, and I was really interested in this field of design. It was this creativity, and all of a sudden I got into prototyping, experimenting, and, you know, acting like an anthropologist and learning all these methods from design, which really what they use at Apple to develop ideas for the most part. And it changed the way I thought. It shifted me from being totally in the left brain, totally rational, totally focused on achievement, to transitioning towards more of being in, you know, my own body, being in my values, you know, being creative. I never thought of myself as creative before, but I had this amazing mentor and friend, George Kemble, who is a co-founder and the head of the design school, who taught me all of this, and it was just a great support too. So I found that my friendship group started to change too. I didn't hang out with Stanford MBAs on the weekend. I started hanging out with ballerinas and with, why not, right? I mean, ballerina, but, or entrepreneurs or writers. And the more I spent time with a different group of people, the more it reinforced this more creative approach to life, and, you know, then dating, obviously, once I got back on my feet a little bit. But I still was going through a very difficult time to sort through my interests, because I had so many interests. And so I think a lot of people struggle with this. And what I did was I literally started to make little bets. And so Little Bets, the book, really is an expression of what I learned through the years in my 30s when I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. And you know, I was really, and there's a chapter at the end called Dark Valleys. I mean, there are many, many dark valleys. There are many, many setbacks. And, you know, I'd go into meetings and I'd be shaking. I I just wanted to get a job. It's like, I look back on that, I'm like, God, I wanted to just get a job. And I can't believe it to think about it now. But I mean, this was just a few years ago. Like, I didn't think I could get a job. I thought I was unemployable because I had confused everyone by being a venture capital investor, where I had an offer to go back to Summit and go on the partner track, and then I did this book project, and then I went through this period where I was engaged, not engaged, you know, had this conflict with Bill George, and you know, people are like, well, what the hell is wrong with this guy? And, you know, the only thing I can say is I knew that intellectually what I was trying to do, and I had an amazing support structure around me with my family and my close friends, but it was really hard. And I mean, just thinking about it, I mean, I almost cried. It was just so hard. And
so what helped you sort of elevate and sort of project your own voice, and knowing what you did want to ultimately do to get to where you are now?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I think, you know, two things come to mind when you ask that question. And I haven't ever been interviewed like this before, so I hope it's helpful to you and your audience. But
yeah, I think this is great. I mean, I think that a lot of listeners and viewers struggle with many of the same issues, I think, but maybe they think they're alone, they don't have other role models to look to, so I think this is great to the extent you can share wisdom that you've already acquired.
Well, you know, I really relied on people like Richard Tait being very open with me in the interview for True North. Richard had really gone through this transition from being a Microsoft employee to being to being a really creative entrepreneur. And you can just imagine like those two extremes. It's like, wow, how did you go from being a biz dev kind of guy at Microsoft to a person who created Cranium, the board game company? And he just talked about that. And he talked, and I read that transcript dozens of times. And he's a good friend of mine to this day. I love him. And you know, it was, I had, you know, my parents were very supportive. Both my parents were very supportive. You know, I remember sitting down with my dad. My dad's a judge. I remember sitting down with my dad one day and him saying to me, he said something like, this was like right at the outside. I went, it's a longer story. I mean, like I said, I don't want to be belabor it because I'm, you know, I don't want to, but, you know, my dad had taken a very linear career path, and, you know, like people who are the kids of doctors, or people who are the kids of even somebody who's like, let's say, a teacher, or somebody who's, you know, been in the army. They take very linear career paths, and then all of a sudden you're saying to your parents, hey, I want to do something different. I want to try to find my bliss, follow my bliss. And now both my parents had encouraged me to do that. They'd always encouraged that. But my dad especially had a really hard time understanding what the hell I was doing. And so, and I had you know, I didn't know what I was doing. And so to have that conversation, I remember sitting with him at lunch. He'd take me to lunch. He'd just sit me down and be like, I'm really worried about you. And he said, do you know what you're doing? And I said, yes, I know what I'm doing. And I really didn't, you know? I mean, I did. I felt like I just had to trust my intuition. So that's really what I ended up learning, is just to trust my own intuition. And it sounds so simple, but the very specific examples are if I met somebody I really liked and I thought that they were somebody who I would want to potentially work with someday, or collaborate with someday, or just have as a friend, I would keep in touch with them. And, you know, Facebook really helped with that. If it was a jerk or just a complete a-hole, I would say, you know what, I don't want to, not only do I not want to be working with this person or anywhere near this person, but I don't even want, you know, I don't even want to be, I don't want to run, you know, I just don't want to have anything to do with them because they're going to bring me down. So I would stay away from those types of people. And there are some people like that who didn't have bad, you know, they're not bad people. It's just that they would give me advice. They would say, Peter, you should go back and work in investing. Go do, you know, go do what you've done. Stick to the knittings. It's like the old marketing advice. Just go stick to your knittings. And here I was trying to do something very, you know, entrepreneurial and creative in terms of thinking about writing a book. And the only thing I say is, like, through those dark moments, I was definitely depressed. Not deeply depressed, but I was depressed. You know, my doctor would just say, hey, you got to hang out with people more, you got to exercise more. I'd be like, all right, I'm on it. And I would be disciplined, but it was just putting one foot after the other. And so that's why this whole notion of little bets was really meaningful to me personally, is that, you know, if you just keep doing something and take your mind, one of the biggest mistakes I made was I would just get in my own head too much. And I just needed to get out into the world and do things, do shit. Just do shit that matters to you. And, you know, if you meet someone, they're doing something interesting, tell them you'll help edit something for them. It starts small, and then as you get into it a little bit, see if it interests you more than their friends and that group, then great, then pursue it. So what ended up happening is I wrote the book, and I interviewed, you know, hundreds of people for this book. I mean, I spent 2.5 years. I had a whole research team at Stanford by the end, and, you know, I really became very close to George Kemble and the D School, and, you know, I started working on little side projects here and there around, like, education and education reform, things that were near and dear to me back from second grade, you know, basically. And then, you know, I just basically, what happened after that was the black sheep evolved, because my dream job would be to work at Pixar, and I love Pixar. Yeah, I go there, and it's the most inspiring place in the world. Like, you go there, and there's literally these two giant cartoon characters from Monsters Incorporated staring at you in the eye when you walk in the door. It's like, how can you not love that atmosphere? So,
yeah. You should check out the interview I did with the lady from Pixar on my site.
Oh, cool! I'd love to. Yeah, who did you interview?
She worked on Brave. Was the show she worked on?
Cool. That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. Good for you. Yeah. So I got to know a bunch of people at Pixar over time, very slowly. I'll give you a very specific example, Andrew, and this for your readers, just to see what the process is like and how hard it is and how many setbacks you have to overcome overcome. You have to get through to be able to have. Now I feel like I'm every day I can just be myself. I just that was my goal, just to be myself. I mean, that was really the overarching goal: be you. And I was working on the research for the book, and I really wanted to try to connect with Ed Catmull, who's the co-founder of Pixar with Steve Jobs and John Lasseter. And I had a really, really hard time getting anybody to return my calls or emails at Pixar, even though I'd already co-authored True North, and even though just goes to show it's really hard to get in some doors. And so I ended up going to a lecture that Ed Catmull gave at Stanford. I heard he was going to be there through some friend of a friend, just keeping your ear low to the ground, trying to hear about stuff that's going to interest you. And he's there, and he gives this lecture that's a beautiful lecture about Pixar's culture, and specifically the mistakes that they made and he's made in particular. And he was kind of sketching outlines for what would become a book. And I went up to him afterwards, and Ed, I really appreciated your lecture. I said, I'm Peter Sims, I'm author of this book, and he's a very open guy. I mean, he's just a great person. So even anybody even just coming out of college, there are people up there talking to him who were recent Stanford grads or who were just in school still, and he was answering them all the same. Like, he was just a very down to earth, grounded guy. And I said, do you mind if I send you some feedback on your ideas? And he said, sure. And he took out a card. He said, I really appreciate that. And he gave me his assistant's card. His assistant's name is Wendy. And so I went back. I said, thank you so much for the lecture. I said, I'm really looking forward to sharing some thoughts. I've thought a lot about this. And so I went and I spent 2 days, 2 work days, writing a memo to Ed Catmull. It was 7 pages long. Maybe it was 8 pages long. This was a long memo. I mean, God help him, right? And I sent it to Wendy, didn't hear back. Now you gotta remember, I'm working on a book, on creativity and innovation, and I'm dialed into the design school. It's not like I don't have some credibility. It's not like I don't have some assets to work with. And that's another way of thinking, just think about what you have that can be valuable to the outside world. And he didn't return. He didn't get back to me. So I ended up calling. You got to be persistent. You got to just call people and check in with them. And I called Wendy and I said, "Hey, did Ed receive my letter?" Because I spent a lot of time on this thing. I didn't say that to her. I just said, "Hey, did he receive the letter?" And she said, "He received the letter. Letter received." Okay, great. So then months went by, and then I guess it was out around the time I was farther along, and there was some exhibit going on. There was some exhibit going on where Pixar's work was being displayed, and the woman I was dating and I went to go see this exhibit. It was in Oakland. And so we went to Oakland, we saw the exhibit, and came back, and we were so inspired. Both of us were so inspired that I wrote a short email to Ed through his assistant to say how much I really appreciated the exhibit. And so then he actually wrote me back that day, thanking me for the note, really nice short note, and saying that he was thinking about potentially writing a book, and that he thought maybe he and I should talk about that sometime by phone. And I said, great, holy cow, what a great thing. And so we ended up, he was really needing advice because he knew what I had to offer him. He knew what assets I could bring to the table. Again, I put this in these terms. It's really, I don't like to use those terms, but the reason I do is because we think so much about the achievements. We think so much about the next award, the next accolade, that when you can just step away from that and think about, what do you know? What do you have? What have you learned? We all have so much to us that is a wonderful thing for the world. It's a beautiful thing for the world. Andrew, you have so much. I know I have so much to learn from you. This time I'm talking, but I know that if we sat down, I would learn so much from you. And I hope share a lot with you and have a lot of fun and laugh and all that. But, we just live in a world, unfortunately, that prizes the rational, the external, the, you know, what's ultimately like the ego. And so I just wanted to, after Little Bets, work at Pixar. I couldn't draw. I got to know Ed Catmull a little bit, and you know, eventually I introduced him to my literary agent, Christy Fletcher, who ended up representing him, and it was kind of just a cool bond that started to shape. And you know, I read everything about Pixar, read everything about Ed Catmull, read everything, and so we decided. So I said, well, you know, I don't want to work in my home anymore. I'm sitting here interviewing you from my home office, and you see this thing is blocking kind of. Like, I wanted to work with my friends on cool, interesting problems and do something like Pixar, like the D School. And since I couldn't work at Pixar really because I couldn't draw, and the D School has a culture that just, you know, it's, ask anyone there, it's quirky. You know, some friends and I said, well, we should create a space, a workspace. And so that's how we decided to create a workspace. And then I came up with the term Black Sheep because I had read an interview of Brad Bird from Pixar, who's a director there at Pixar, who are willing to really think differently about the status quo and use radically different approaches and artistic approaches to solve problems in new and different ways. And I was just so inspiring. So we said, call this called Black Sheep. And then my friend Andy Smith, who's another author here in the Bay Area, he's married to Jennifer Ocker, who's a Stanford professor. So it's kind of this little group of people who, you know, started to become my group of peers and professional supports and all this. You know, out of that grew this chance to collaborate and conspire to create a workspace. And so we called it Black Sheep, and Andy went to Cafe Press, and you can go to Cafe Press right now and see that, you know, we have this Black Sheep swag. You can create it in 10 minutes. So literally we just had a designer whip together a logo. We literally copied this logo from this bar in San Francisco called the Black Sheep, and almost copied it, just kind of reversed it and put it on hats. And the next thing you know, I'm going around the country and everybody wants to have one of these hats because I'm speaking in all these companies and organizations. So I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. And then, and what do we do with that? So this is Little Bets, a manifestation of Little Bets. And the company today does three things. You know, we're a startup, so we're just starting, but we do three things. We create for-profit businesses that can generate income to fund social entrepreneurial ventures. And so an example of that would be one of our businesses is called Think Differently by Black Sheep. That name may change, but what we do is innovation advisory services. So you know, Little Bets, corporate innovation audience, or a lot of creative audiences, they'll say, well, how do we make Little Bets? And, you know, for example, I'm on the innovation advisory board at General Electric now. Well, so this is a way of taking those opportunities that are coming in by virtue of this asset that's been created with a book to then, you know, monetize it. So that's really, I think, the key intellectual switch that is flipped, is to think about how can you take your assets, create value for the world, and then you monetize that. So you think about it in terms of a balance sheet instead of an income statement. Now think about that for a second. Your career progression, if you think about your career in terms of a balance sheet and not an income statement, then you're not worried about trying to grow each step in your career to some little step higher, to a little step higher, a little step higher. This is artificial anyway. You're thinking about how you can take your experiences and create value for the people you're working with, for society. And so you have all these assets. Everybody has assets, and you can constantly build assets. And once you have one asset, it can lead to another asset. So a book, obviously, is a great asset because then it can lead to creating a company like an innovation advisory firm. And so that's what we're doing. I'm partnering, collaborating right now, likely partnering with Casey Haskins, who I'd interviewed for the book. Casey's a former head of military instruction at West Point. He trained all the cadets in how to prepare for asymmetric warfare, blah, 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 blah. This is like what all these companies are trying to solve. It's like, how do we think in a more creative, adaptive way, starting at the strategic layer and going on that. So lots of innovation type words, but it's fun. We have a lot of fun. We learn a lot, and I really like working with Casey. I can be me, and he can be him, and we can have a Pixar-like culture for Black Sheep, even though it's like a networked organization. And then with that, we use you know, we're going to use the proceeds and the profits of that to fund out things like allowing people like yourself to develop their own voices, right? So to give people a place that's a creative place. And so we have people who come to Black Sheep who be entrepreneurs in residence or artists in residence or what have you. We basically give them a business card, a calling card, and then we partner with groups like for the 92 Street Y in New York. We're going to do a lecture series in partnership with them next year on topical issues around social entrepreneurship and blah, blah, blah. We do a lot of different things. So the company that's most, the Pixar's the dream culture, and the values, and we use structure, and then the company that I also really admire that is sort of a role model in many ways is Virgin, because you can hang a lot of different businesses under a brand that is aspirational and that connects with a sense of of humanity and still make a great business. And so anyway, it's a B corporation. It's it's socially beneficial corporation. I'm not in this to make billions of dollars, but I would like to have this group of people I've been fortunate enough to co-found it with. Well, I say co-found. I founded it. I funded it with my own resources, but I've had a wonderful group of people get involved, including Domingo Rudello, who's our creative lead and who I've known for 3 or 4 years. I met him at a friend's birthday party, and he was writing copy for a marketing firm before coming on the Black Sheep. He's now doing everything. He's a filmmaker. He's a photographer. He's managing a creative team of extremely talented creative people, both people who are on the payroll who I'm paying, or who are kind of partnering with us on different things like the 92Y or what have you. So Domingo's got this fantastic role, and his nickname in the Black Sheep among our core circle is Jordan, because he's the point guard. You just give him the ball and go. And and then we have another guy who I met on the beach. I literally met Russell Robinson on the beach in Barcelona this summer, and was just blown away by his humor, his insight, his creativity, and he's now our brand guru. He's our chief, our kind of artistic person. So he helps Casey and me, and we're doing a music business as well to really develop our voice, our brand, our approach to the outside world, and we can just leverage that brand across a lot of different businesses. So we're looking at doing things in publishing. That was one of the original intents of getting this group together, and I don't know, it's taken on a life of its own, and all I'm trying to do is just help it off the ground and then step back into a role that's less intense, because I'm really, as you know, exhausted from this fall.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, thank you for sharing that. That's a pretty amazing journey, and I mean, I think definitely appreciate your sharing a lot of the personal struggles and the sort of the deep thinking that you had gone through in charting out this path, because it's not the path that's well worn. I want to riff on something that you said, that you mentioned actually a number of times just now, which is that, and you talked about this actually in your book, Little Bets. Clearly you've met some amazing people along the way that have inspired you, that you've worked with, and some that have been hard to get to that you wanted to work with. In your book, Little Bets, you talk quite a bit about some of the research that Richard Wiseman, the psychology professor, has done on luck. And in particular, you talk about how he's found in his research that one common trait of lucky people is that they build and maintain a strong network. And here I'm actually quoting, "Lucky people are effective at building secure, long-lasting attachments with people they meet. They are easy to know and most people like them. They tend to be trusting and form close relationships with others. And as a result, they often keep in touch with a much larger number of friends and colleagues than unlucky people. Time and again, this network of friends helps promote opportunity in their lives. Extroversion," Wiseman found, "pays opportunity and insight rewards." You also talk about in your other book, True North, the importance of building support networks as you develop as a leader. And it sounds like that was very important for you as you were getting through some of the darker periods when you were trying to figure out what you wanted to do in your career. Knowing that you cannot fake this, you can't fake relationships with people.
Right.
That's phony.
Right.
Nevertheless, some people are better at building a network than others, and a lot of people are also introverted by nature, so it may not come as naturally to them as others. Yet clearly it's important. What would you advise people to get better at building and maintaining relationships genuinely? What are things that people can do to be more effective at this?
That's a great question. I've never been asked any of these questions by anyone, but I think they're really good questions. And never been asked this in an interview. People are always asking me about kind of how do you innovate this and how do you do this, and you can look at research and stuff. But I just, every time I meet someone, I'll give you an example. Let's see, when was it? I just got back from New York. I was in New York it was last Wednesday, was it? Last week. It was definitely it was Monday. It was a Monday event. See, I lose track of time because I've been on the road for a week and a half, and I'm juggling so many things. But it was definitely last Monday. I was at this event. It's a charity water ball. I paid $200 to support Scott Harrison and Charity Water, and I paid not only $200, I paid $400 because I paid for myself and a guest. And I ended up going with a woman who's a wonderful person, who's just a friend, Valentina Kova. She's somebody I met through this group called Summit Series. And just, I don't even know, I can't remember how we originally met, but I remember just through the years, she and I have bumped into each other at various events, and I've always liked her personally, and so I've gotten to know her a little bit better this year, and I just thought, well, she'd be a great fun to go to this event. She's a great person. She teaches at Parsons, the creative school, and she's a fashion designer. She's really artistic, and so I really enjoy her. She's a beautiful woman, obviously. Come on. This is Valentina Kova. What a name, right? It's like, great name. So anyway, there we are at the event, and she spots across the way Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg is there at this event. It's a huge event. There's tons of people there. So she says, I would love to meet Whoopi Goldberg. Do you want to go meet Whoopi Goldberg? And I was like, I guess. I remember Whoopi Goldberg from The Color Purple or Sister Act, and I don't watch The View, but I guess I've learned that since then she's on The View. And so anyway, we go over there and we're standing there, and a couple things. One is, when I was at Summit Partners, we had to cold call entrepreneurs. Now, this was very hard for me, being an analytical guy, to cold call people. And so I learned through lots of failure and setbacks that you just do it. You just keep doing it, and it's little bets. It really is little bets, actually, and looking back at cold calling. So, now I've done so many little bets meeting people that, I told you earlier, I learned by talking with people. I'm not a very good classroom learner. I didn't do well in my SATs. I'm not a classroom person, but I'm a very curious person. And so everybody's, it's very rare that I meet someone I just don't enjoy meeting. Sometimes it happens that the person's an asshole. I just don't like it. I would rather be, anywhere else besides talking with that person. But in the case of Whoopi Goldberg, Valentina introduced herself, and she said, said a few words, and then she said, do you know Peter Sims? And then she turned to me. I'm like, yeah, how is she going to know Peter Sims? And then so she said, Peter is a best-selling author, which is half true. I was co-author of a best-selling book, and Little Bets has won, a lot of awards, but it wasn't like a New York Times bestseller. And then she said, and he's the author of this book, Little Bets. And so Whoopi Goldberg looked at me and she said, I've heard of Little Bets. You wrote Little Bets? And I said, wow. I was shocked. I said, yes, I wrote Little Bets. And so I was a bit overwhelmed by that. But then I asked her where she's from. When we started this call, I asked you where you're from. I don't even know if that was being recorded. Was Harold on the recording? I don't even know when you started the actual recording, but
yeah,
Harold was? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
We got to call back, right? Wrap this up in a few minutes, but this is kind of a cool story because then she said she knows Little Bets. I asked her where she was from. She's describing where she's from and a little bit about her passion, always ask people where they're from to start rather than talking about their title, because everybody's, and I learned this in True North, everybody's values are really shaped from their earliest days. Now, here's what happened with Whoopi Goldberg. Valentina was nervous. I say that. If this goes out to her, Valentina is so humble that she was nervous. And this happens a lot, right? People are just, they don't think that they're worthy of talking with someone. But I always look at everyone, whether it's you or, you know, a guy who's going to my high school or a gal who's going to my high school or Whoopi Goldberg or the President of the United States. I look at them as a human being, right? They all have their stories. We're all shaped by our stories in life, you know, and this is what True North is all about. Authentic leadership, you know, it's about stories. And so you had a scoutmaster had a big impact on you, or Howard Schultz grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, and, you know, and that's how we connect, is through our stories. So Whoopi Goldberg heard about, so then she was, then Valentina was saying how I had co-founded Fuse Corps. So Fuse Corps is this really cool program for people like you, and where you go spend a year working with a mayor, governor, social entrepreneur. You get paid a nice stipend. It's a very highly selective program. This is like the Rhodes Scholarship for social change. And, you know, told her the example of how Erica Dimmler was a CNN producer, and then she left her CNN producership to go work for Mayor Kevin Johnson in Sacramento as chief of staff, and the goal was to solve this problem, which is how do you bring healthy eating into the Sacramento Five School District. So instead of starting with like the answer and telling people how to change the school system from Washington, Erica Dimmler went in and talked with the teachers and the students and everybody who's, you know, the citizens, the people who have the needs and the problems. And, you know, it's this beautiful thing when you go. I went to see Erica's launch of this thing, and the kids are holding shovels and hoes, and like, it's like, wow, you know, this is design, this is entrepreneurship, right? Social entrepreneurship at its best, and they're planting a whole freaking garden in the school district, right in the middle of the school district. So this is like so inspiring to see, and I'm telling Whoopi Goldberg this story, and she said, that's cool. That's cool that you were involved with that, right? I co-founded this. I'm very active. I spend 20, 25 hours a week on Fuse Corps in addition to speaking and doing this and doing black sheep business. And it's like, she's like, this is so cool. This is so inspiring. She's like, you know what you need to do though? Instead of working on a high-end project, you know, because Alice Waters, the chef of Chez Panisse, is involved with this Sacramento project. So instead of working with Alice Waters, you guys should be working to help very, very poor people to plant gardens, bodegas. You know, this is such a cool idea that, you know, I said to her, listen, Whoopi, you know, I grew up in the foothills of Northern California between Sacramento and Tahoe. My neighbors, our neighbors in the town of Dutch Flat, this little tiny gold mining town where we have a house. My family has a house, and my dad's been very sentimental to my dad for years. It's kind of this family compound. They're doing the same thing, you know, and I think this is happening all throughout America. So she and I were able to connect through our stories on that level, and I said to her, you know, we should do a Fuse Corps fellow to tackle this problem. And she's like, you know what, I would love to do that, Peter. And it was like, it had made her day to connect with someone in that way, in a very human way, and to be able to do something about something that she cared about, and to feel like she wasn't alone, and to be able to say, okay, here's my email address. And she gave me her email address, and it's like, you know, it's an @Mac, you know, it's like, she's like, my PR firm would kill me if she knew that I have this email address. But then I wrote her an email just saying how, you know, nice to meet her, and how excited I was to lock arms with her, and really a collaborative spirit of like, let's find out how we can raise this money, and let's go find a project, and let's just pull in whoever we need to pull in to do this. I mean, it's Whoopi Goldberg. I mean, we should be able to do it pretty easily, right? So she writes back, and she's excited, and she signed it, whoop. So anyway, that's an example of like the type of stuff that happens after years of just being curious. And, you know, my parents are very genuine, and so, you know, I think I'm a genuine person. you know, I don't have, my intentions are pretty open. I'm very transparent with people. I don't, you know, I don't try to be someone I'm not anymore. I used to when I was in more the patches external phase, and you know where that's what one of the things that rubbed Bill George the wrong way is that I wasn't comfortable being the authentic leader example. I wanted to be, you know, I wanted to be, if we were going to want to speak about it, I wanted to be the co-author, and so. You know, but it was Bill's book, and he gave me the opportunity. So it's understandable that he would feel some frustration that, you know, I was challenging him on that. But the fact of the matter is, you know, here we are. I'm 36, and, you know, I never would have guessed when I was growing up that I would be doing what I'm doing. And, you know, the person who called earlier, Harold O'Neill, and I have so much fun hanging out personally. Plus, we can collaborate on professional things. Harold's a jazz pianist. We do this thing where we just made a little bet to start videotaping one of our interactions once, where we were just having some fun and improvising because, you know, really Pixar is an improvisational culture. I'm sort of an entrepreneur that's very improvisational, as the people who work with me know. And, you know, in entrepreneurial within a set of constraints that are my values and ethics and a framework that is informed by working in venture capital and getting an MBA and having the good fortune of going to Stanford, getting an MBA, and learning from a lot of people. So that to me is a great gift. And I do feel like, you know, conversations like these, I'll take a little bit more time, even though I'm really tired. I'm supposed to be, you know, really just relaxing right now after a crazy week. But I hope that there may be something here for you or for the people who watch this, because like I say, when I was going through that many difficult experiences, many setbacks, many moments of loneliness, many moments of hardship and, you know, depression and, you know, moments where I even felt suicidal. You know, I tell you that just keep putting one foot in front of the other, keep making bets, keep learning, keep listening, keep open, and just follow your heart, you know. And that's what Howard Schultz signed my book when after we interviewed it. He signed my book, and he was gracious to sign my book and say, you know, that he felt like I was going to be very successful and that, you know, he wanted to follow my progress, but that he also said, you know, just follow your heart and believe in your dreams. And I try to impart that wisdom to others because that's really what I ended up doing, although it was it's all clear in hindsight. It wasn't clear, and I love this expression. Randy Komisar taught me this. It's everything's clear in the rearview mirror, but you can't see where you're going when you're looking through the front mirror. So you just have to keep at it and keep finding people you really love and you know, believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Just yourself and be you, and it's that simple.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's very, very inspiring. And I think the real lesson here is that when you meet anybody, find out what it is that they're authentically passionate about, and see how you can work together, collaborate, help them to, you know, spark that relationship in the beginning.
Yeah.
So, last question for you.
Just add on one quick thing that was helpful too, because this was a really different. I think of like a lot of these mindsets that just need to shift, right? Like, you know, the mindset of like networking versus the mindset of, hey, you and I just met. I don't know you from Adam. I mean, you're asking me great questions, though. You've done your research. You're passionate about entrepreneurship. I'm thinking, gosh, you and I could probably collaborate on something. You know, what can I loop you in on? What are you interested in? And then email's great. And I piss a lot of people off. My nickname in the Black Sheep is Tornado, because I will send emails and I'll copy like 6 people, and they'll be like, why are you copying me on this email with that person and that person? And they get really frustrated because they're not used to somebody. You know, I just sent out an email to, you know, like, I don't know, 4 people who don't know each other with this really obscure kind of back and forth. This with Harold and I, and, you know, it's like some people are just like, you don't get it, you know, but you just have to keep pushing, keep being you, and everybody has a role in life. You know, you have your role, I have my role. If I can help you to do your role in life better, and, you know, we can collaborate on stuff, we're going to do a lot of cool things over time. That's how things really happen. It's collaboration, and you have to take away the people I have trouble with and who really give me, I get yelled at once a week by people. Somebody will call me and they'll yell at me, a Stanford professor, what have you. And I listen and I take it in and I go talk with my shrink about it and I talk with my mentors about it. And I talk with my family and my, the woman I'm dating. But at the end, it's everyone. And so you just have to be you and realize that at the end of the day, you're going to have to take that feedback that people give you and just do the best you can every day. And I think that's all everybody wants to do, is just do the best they can every day and, lead a life where they can be themselves. I mean, it's that simple. That's all people want to do. And that only happens in collaboration, because if it's, if there's too much ego involved, where it's all about one person, then you can't get nearly as much done. Ronald Reagan said it best, I think. He said something like, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, you can get a hell of a lot done if you don't care who gets credit for it.
Yeah, I've heard the quote. Awesome. I just have one last question for you, Peter. What practical advice would you offer to people who, might like to transition someday into a role like one that you've had, for them to just think about as they navigate their own career choices? And here, tactically speaking, I'm reminded of what you talk about in Little Bets, about how one of the distinctive aspects of Little Bets, the Little Bets approach to innovation, is that it focuses you on what you can afford to lose rather than what you can expect to gain. And so if you were to apply this thinking to the way young people think about their careers, what are little bets that people can make as they search for their career calling and try to develop it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm really glad to end on this one, because we so often think that we have to be perfect to do something new. Right? You have to get something perfect. It has to be just right. And that's not the way creativity works. When Howard Schultz founded Starbucks, I like to tell this story a lot, because Howard is a visionary in many ways, and he's incredible foresight, incredible marketing and branding insight, and a hell of a leader. A hell of a motivator. But, when he went to Italy and was inspired to start Starbucks, he came back and he started a store that became Starbucks. He eventually bought what was then Starbucks, a Starbucks small chain of coffee stores. But he started this thing called Il Giornale, which was one coffee store modeled on the Italian coffee experience that had nonstop opera music playing like Italy. They had the menus in Italian. They had the baristas were wearing bow ties, which they found very uncomfortable. And then there was no chairs. There were no chairs in the first Starbucks. Can you believe that? No chairs. It's very different today, right? So Howard says that they had to make a lot of mistakes to discover what was going to work. And so, a little bit, an affordable loss is saying something up front. You don't know if it's going to work or not. When Harold O'Neill and I did our first adventures with Harold and Peter, Adventures of Harold and Peter on this iPhone, it's on my blog. It was silly. We were just having fun. We were just being playful. We were just kind of being kids. It was also very interesting because Howard's a brilliant Harold, confusing Harold and Howard Schultz, but Harold O'Neill is a brilliant pianist. You can Google and find information on him. He's going to be huge. He's going to be a household name. And so just watching him play piano, I learned so much from him watching him play piano or talk about improvisation. It's just an amazing person. He's also a professional, he's a bebop dancer. He's a professional breakdancer. He does all these, he wears these many hats. And so I'm constantly learning from him, and that's what people see through this side. And then he turns it around sometimes on me, and we see how across these different worlds we learn something. That story is a little bit. Now we just did it with Baron Davis, yesterday, and Baron Davis was blown away. It's going to lead to some great things for I think especially for Harold, because he's about to break on the scene in a big way. So anyway, just keep thinking about what you can do that's simple, that you're interested in, that you just try it. Why not? If it can, it's like the comedians. If you see Chris Rock, he's perfect. This is an example I use a lot because they're perfect on the big stage, but when they're starting out in the small clubs to develop material, which is where all comedians have to develop material, they suck. They suck. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because that's how creativity works. And they don't let, Chris Rock doesn't even let people use their cell phone cameras when he's up there. So, you know, this is the reality of what it takes. 6 months later, he's ready with a one-hour act that he's tried every joke and every transition, everything else. So anyway, thank you for doing what you're doing, Andrew, and you're doing a great service in the way you're doing it. And I hope that your listeners and readers take some insight from this. And I never get asked these questions. I mean, so I feel guilty. Not guilty. That's not how I feel. I don't feel guilty. I feel a little bit. It's a little bit odd to have talked about myself for as long as we just have. You know, especially when I thought we were going to go less time. But the reason I did is because the only way that I was able to get through very, very difficult transition from being Patches to being Tornado, which is my nickname, as I mentioned, my black sheep nickname, was by this process of discovery and little bets, and by having people around who are willing to be open with me about their experiences, especially their setbacks and failures. And Bill George is, you know, one of the most open people I know, and he's absolutely one of the people who deserves a great deal of credit for that. And a lot of the other interviews we had did as well. Warren Bennis was our executive editor, so all these people played a really informative role in the end, even though getting there was quite difficult.
Absolutely. Well, I really also very much thank you for spending the time with us, and really appreciate your insights. It was hugely educational for me, and I hope it will be for our readers and viewers as well. Thank you so much, Peter.
You.
Take care. Bye-bye.